Welcome to the House of Brand, where we help unleash the true potential of your brand. If you're a business owner, leader, or C-suite executive and you're ready to scale your business to new heights, you're in the right place. I'm Tori Azure, your guide in turning your brand into a strategic advantage for your company. In each episode, we get straight to the heart of what it takes to build a brand that drives growth, that shapes culture, and fuels your marketing efforts. So let's get started. Hey, welcome everybody. Today we have the COO of BrandCraft, my partner in crime, and what I think she likes to call that does all the things in the agency, Kellie Easley. So welcome, Kellie.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Yeah, this is a really interesting podcast subject, so I'm glad that we're going to tackle it. What we're going to talk about today, this idea of marketing debt, and I don't think if you go search this, I did a bit of that. I don't think there's a lot of information out there on what we're talking about when it comes to marketing debt. But you and I talked about it. I kind of introduced the idea to you and said, hey, like this is something I think that's important to people in business in general, which is I think something, a passion of yours is just to like, what is operationally, like what do we need to do? And so it'll be interesting today to get your perspective on how people might look at this idea of marketing debt and what it means. So what does the concept mean? Marketing debt is this idea that to be successful in marketing takes some work up front. It could be brand, it could be something else, but really it takes some work up front to get to a point where you have, I would say, a high level of success with lead generation and all the things that really, I would say, quote unquote, are important to some clients. And so when I brought that up to you, what did you think originally, like when I brought that up? Were you like, yeah, that makes sense? Or did you have to think about it for a little bit before you like, yeah, I don't know if that's important or not?
Well, I actually had heard marketing debt before.
So you had?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But interestingly, I think most of what you can find on it, which isn't a lot, doesn't really talk about exactly when. So is it always foundational? Is it always at the beginning?
Yeah.
Are there times in the life cycle when it might become more relevant or important? And I think for different size companies, that is an important part of the conversation because it isn't always at the beginning, especially when you are talking about brand.
I agree. I wonder if it shouldn't be at the beginning, actually. I think that sometimes at the beginning, what you need to be doing more of is testing and putting product out in front of clients and trying to sell. Man, we've had a lot of clients come through here, Kellie, that have spent a lot of money on attorneys, on business plans, on a lot of money on just preparing to launch a company.
Yeah.
And they don't sell that much once they launch it. And all that money just is kind of gone when really they could have spent more time testing and selling and seeing, do people want this product or they not want this product? And for that reason, maybe that's a good reason to say you don't want to put a bunch of marketing dollars into that first version. Wait until you've seen some success. So I think so on this podcast, we like to say that our main audience is that in the small business or emerging mid-market. There are people that are like, hey, we've had 5 million in revenue, maybe all the way up to 50 million in revenue, but we've figured out our product at this point. We're a stage 2 company.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's better then to say, okay, what do we need to do to get to the next stage? In fact, if you look at what we're doing right now with BrandCraft and the changes we've made, we're kind of doing that.
Yep. Yeah.
We're saying like, hey, what kind of marketing, and maybe it's not so much marketing debt, but it's just different. Because we're an agency, when we're doing the work that we've done, well, I'll give you guys, the listeners, background on that. What we have done in the last few months is dedicated a lot of resources within the agency to our rebrand and reimagining what we're going to do as an agency. That, for us, results in less revenue, and the marketing debt comes through as even on some months negative net income because we're putting so much resources into this brand product and putting our employees on it. So to others, though, they would have to invest in that. They would actually have to take money. What do you think prevents people on the marketing side? Because they don't always have a problem spending money, but why do you think on the marketing side do they not accept that this idea that we're going to have to invest and get into this marketing debt a little bit? What do you think maybe turns people off on that or says, nah, I don't think we need to do that right now?
I think there's a number of factors. One of the ones that we see often is they're undervaluing that cost of acquisition, if you will. And also, a lot of founders, leaders are balancing many different things, right? They have a limited budget. And oftentimes, there's a lot more willingness to spend on the things that we have a solid grasp on or we feel will definitely give us a return. And, candidly, in marketing, you don't always have that guarantee. You're spending money to do testing, you're spending money to find that right audience. And so sometimes I think there's just a little bit of misinformation about what's worth it and how much something should cost and how much you should be investing at different stages.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think you get into, it's very easy. I'll use construction as an example of a service line where it's very easy to know when I buy that backhoe or that truck or that this, that I can put it out in the field. I can watch it working. I can watch it and see what it's doing. And there's this idea that's not quite as tangible with marketing. But how do you think, how would you try and convince somebody that it is much like that backhoe or that truck or that? How do you think you would message that? Or what would you tell somebody to say, it's there, it's just as valuable and it's just as, in your words, how do you think you might say that?
Yeah, I think it might depend a little bit on what exactly we're talking about. So I'll talk about brand first because I know that's, a big focal point of the podcast. But when you're talking about something like brand, that is a foundational element that has a very long lifespan and it branches all throughout the organization. It's both customer facing and internal.
Yeah.
And that's worth investing in when you look at it that way. But I think sometimes consumers or just general people tend to look at it as a logo, right? Or I'll just spin something up real quick and get it out there or that kind of thing. And they don't think about how those are all building blocks on something larger that you're building and will have legs. So I think in that scenario, you want to talk about what you're building on. And what that value really is to the organization long term. I think in shorter term, more transactional type discussions, if you're looking at what to spend on digital marketing, for example, I think that that's a different question. I think you have to really start looking at things like cost of acquisition and what those customers are worth to you. And when you look at it in that framework, it often opens up a whole other level of conversation where you can really get into how to make the budget work for you and looking at it as more of an investment. Things like spending on awareness, which is generally one that clients don't want to spend a lot on, right? Because there isn't that tangibility. Like you mentioned, the truck and that kind of thing. You can't put your arms around that right away. It may take a little bit longer to realize that. So in that respect, it's a longer term investment versus in the short term, I'm going to spin something up quickly. It's going to generate revenue right away and I can draw that direct line.
Yeah. Okay. You worded that very well, and it leads me to then another point, which I think is one of the reasons people get turned off by it, which is this idea of how do I know if I'm investing or wasting? I can't tell the difference. Money's going out, but things aren't coming back in right now. And I think there's some answers for that. Brand is one that we look at and say brand is always an investment, and brand is the DNA of your company. So if you're going to say we're going to document the DNA of who we are, we're going to understand who we want to hire. We're going to understand what we're going to say in the market. We're going to do all this in our brand work that we're going to do with us, with anybody else out there that I would say is good at brand and does it. We do it at our agency, BrandCraft. We do it. We have our own system for it and how we do it that we think uncovers a lot of the business reasons of why you're in business. And that's important for the employees and the consumer. From that, if you look at a website, other marketing tools that you might have, many of those can be investments as well. They're not maybe long-term investments. A website can only last so long, but they're necessary. And having that right message and that right brand reflected in the website makes a difference. Now, sometimes people come to us. We've seen this before. Hey, we need help. You will be our third agency, in fact, in a short period of time, because no one can seem to figure out how to get conversions or leads for us. Sometimes that client we see and we go, yeah, you have a brand problem. And because you have a brand problem, you have a website problem. And all we're doing really is wasting money if we take this and sending them to a landing page that doesn't work. So in that respect, waste can happen. And you got to make sure you know the difference between investing and having a bit of that marketing debt and then wasting and just throwing marketing money out the door. So I think that as you go from small to emerging market to this Fortune 500, in the Fortune 500 and large companies, their marketing spend and what they're doing is pretty well known. They know they have a percentage of
Percentage
doing
of
it.
revenue,
I think maybe the small business, they're undecided. They don't really know what to spend or how much or what should happen. And we try and help them with that. But it's difficult to find a number and to tell somebody too. Although sometimes I like to compare it to people. Let's say that you were going to put somebody in charge of owning this brand. They were going to be the brand person in the agency. And then you're going to put somebody in charge of being the one to communicate out to all of your potential customers about why you are different. That would be the website, let's say. But if you put them in people terms, how much would you pay those two people? And then you look at that and say, okay, if I would pay these people $90,000 a year to do that, I would say consider how that translates to how much you're going to spend on the brand process and how much you're going to spend on the website, because the website's going to be live for 4 years. And can it replace a person? Yeah, it can replace people dialing phones and doing all that. So it can replace people. It might be an interesting way to look at. We've never really told anybody. I don't think I've told anybody that particular way of thinking.
Yeah.
But I've thought it myself. Like that's a way to measure it. What other ways do you think, or is that one you think is pretty relevant?
I think that one's definitely pretty relevant. I mean, your website is essentially your 24/7 salesperson, right? So that answers the call at any time of day for any need or any reason. But it's also an important tool that your existing team, whether you have a small team or you are looking to grow your team, from that perspective, can leverage.
Yeah.
It can make their jobs better. It can make things more efficient. There's automations and things that you can set up that help better inform them as marketers. And I would say even just that shift of perspective of looking at a lot of what agencies like BrandCraft and others can do is inform. And one of the things when you talk long-term versus short-term is like wasting, right? From that example is if you're not constantly looking at the strategy that you're taking and taking the data in, if you're out on all these platforms, use that data to help you make decisions and don't set it and forget it. And really, how we use those things to evolve our approach, what's working, what's not working, and that can shift all the time. So I think as far as how to evaluate whether it's wasted spend, I think those are the things I would look at, having been on client side before and thinking about, okay, is it time to grow my team or do I need to invest in other ways? And trying to balance those things instead of just an either or, how could these things work together?
Yeah.
So if I've got this great team in-house that's doing these set things, what partners do they need to help them be more successful? Are we better off hiring our own in-house person, or should we bring an agency on that's an expert in SEO or, that sort of thing, and really looking at how each of these things come together to make your strategy effective. What results are you trying to drive, and what's the best way to get there? Rather than looking at it as waste, I would look at, okay, are we optimized? Are there things we could be doing differently or better? Are we using all the data that we have? Are we pivoting when we need to?
Yeah.
All of those questions. And I think sometimes for our core customer, they've been around long enough that they know their audience well enough, they know their customer base well enough, versus when you're just getting started, you're learning those things as you go. And I know you've talked a lot about this in those early years at BrandCraft and learning that and getting to that place. You sometimes do have to try things. And I think you have to be really clear about what you're willing to do, how much you're willing to invest, if you will, to give something a shot, and why you're trying that. Not just throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks, but have a strategy for what you're going to try, why you're trying it, what success looks like, and measuring it, and then growing from there.
Yeah, because spend that doesn't work doesn't also mean it's wasted. In other words, as part of the marketing process, and we talk to clients about this, is we're going to take risks every once in a while, and we're going to do things to see if they work, and we're going to try certain campaigns, or we're going to try techniques, maybe channels. We'll try these things to say, let's test and see if we can get a better return than we're getting right now. And with that, sometimes you don't have much return. You don't have much that comes out of it. And that is different to me. Trying and not succeeding with the best intentions is much different than having no real game plan and just spending money and handing it over to the channel and nothing happens with it. They're just two different things. So I can see why someone's confused, though. I'm a small business. I don't know the difference between wasted ad spend and good non-productive ad spend. I don't know the difference maybe between investing or can I just Well, if it's just a website, I can just get the low-cost provider and they can get me a web. Well, isn't that going to be great? And the answer sometimes is it depends. Sometimes you do luck out and you get just a great product from a great freelancer for a price that matters. And I would say really like working on the agency side, maybe with an agency like us, one thing that you get is, I think, process, understanding. We know, we've been through it before. I think we ask our clients a lot of tough questions and also tell them when we think the answer is not good enough. And we do it in a way that I think is good. Like they feel comfortable saying, okay, you're right. We need to have something, maybe better than that. I think it's a good transition right now to talk about, okay, in marketing, we had a client that introduced us to this. And when I say they introduced us, it's not like nobody knew what it meant, but they always used the shortened version, tofu, mofu, and bofu, right? Top of funnel, middle of funnel, bottom of funnel. And so marketing debt, I think, follows this process, which you say, okay, client B comes to us. Let's say they're a professional services company. They do, let's say that they're an accountant. An accountant comes to us and they say, hey, this is where we are. We've grown to this stage. We're really not onboarding any new clients. Often when they come, they ask us, can you guys run some ads or do some SEM so we get lead generation going and we start to get more people coming. There are certain industries where this can be effective, where you can just start running, but more often than not, especially in professional services, like the way that we think about it, is that accountant first needs to establish their brand and know what they're going to say. They need to update their website to make sure that that's, if we're taking clients there in the marketing platform. And then we should run some awareness. We should make sure people are aware that they're here. This goes to this idea of marketing debt, and why people can sometimes be opposed to it, though, is it is really hard to show attribution at the top of the funnel. Like people, especially when you talk about small business and mid-market, you say, hey, we're running some top of funnel branded campaigns about who you guys are and why you're different. And we're sending some videos out and we're just watching, or maybe we're collecting audience data, but they're not seeing much happen for a while, right? How do you think, have we been a part, I don't know if you and I have been a part of a conversation together, I'm trying to think as I'm saying this, with a client who's had this where they're like, well, I'm just not, I don't know, we're not really, we have had a client, I do remember this. I can't remember what client it was, though. We had a client, I remember, that would say, well, we should be running more awareness. And then we said, well, how are we going to measure that? And they would say, well, with leads. You'd say, well, that's not really awareness. That's bottom of the funnel. That's leads. But what about the importance of this idea of going through the platform from top of funnel to middle of funnel to bottom of funnel? When we talk about investing, that's really what we're talking about. It's the complete marketing platform. And how is that different than just trying to go out and get leads, like in your mind?
I think it's, when you say different, I think when you're talking about B2B or even just service companies in general, because accountants aren't necessarily B2B, it's not quite as straightforward as, say, an e-commerce product, right? Where I have socks to sell, I'm going to spin up an ad. You're far greater likelihood of success of finding somebody that just wants to buy some socks and will buy them today. And even people who sell socks sometimes have to go through the funnel. But in general, there's this rapid fire, like I'm just going to put something out there that's really awesome and people are going to buy it. I think some of these other services are a longer buying cycle. They need to understand it a little bit better, and the consumer might not be actively searching for it right then in that moment. And so you have to differentiate yourself, right? Like there's a million CPAs, lots of other attorneys, lots of other wealth management companies, others that are in this service industry out there. And you have to differentiate yourself and tell that story so that they are engaged and they are listening, and they need to oftentimes be exposed to the brand multiple times, because they're not looking right away immediately the way you would at socks, where you're looking at, features and benefits really quick. Well, how are they priced? Maybe doing a little price shop type of thing. That's not that type of transaction. And so the consumer needs a little bit more time to get to know you and to understand what it is that you offer that's different than others, and what might be in it for them.
Yeah, good point. Because and I'll tell our listeners, at BrandCraft, we focus on a lot of those professional type services, B2B, home services, and these companies where the buying decision isn't immediate.
Yeah.
I've admitted before that I've gone through the process very quickly on Facebook where the ad shows up, like for the socks, and I've bought it within about 2 minutes. Like
We've all been there.
I went through the whole process of, I've never seen this brand too. This looks interesting, so why don't I just buy it, and then I'll decide if I like it or not. And you can do that at a certain price point. You can convince people to buy at a certain price point. But yeah, on the accountant, let's stay on the accountant.
Yeah.
On the accountant, when we deliver a message to somebody and make them aware that that accountant exists, number one. And what we try and do is also at that same time slide a little bit over to them in messaging that says, this is how we're a little bit different. We're different than other accountants in this way. That's really the positioning. We're trying to position them to say, hey, we're different than your current accountant. Let's say that resonates with somebody. They still might not make a decision to change for another year.
Right.
I mean, they might be locked into a contract. They might not really be in a position of thinking about switching, or it just might be overwhelming at the time. These are also bigger engagements, so it's not super easy to switch. But that makes it more difficult. That again goes back to that marketing debt, which is nobody's going to make a really quick decision. What we need to have is that top of funnel where we say, hey, this is who we are. Understand that we're a little bit different. On the middle, let's help you understand more, maybe about us or more about yourself or more about what you need to do in the marketing world. And we're going to be there in the bottom of the funnel when you're ready. And that can be difficult with low volume.
Yeah.
With really high volume companies, they have a really clear idea of what that funnel looks like as people through marketing get through it. And so I think you just have to do the best you can to be in places where your audience is. We like to say, in fact, one of the the sub companies of what we operate, the active audience is your audience is very active and moving around, and you have to be active too. You have to go find them and follow them. But in that is that tofu, mofu, bofu is what we're talking about. Is you have to go find them.
And sometimes you have to, I think, relate to them on a different level. And one of the ways that we focus on doing that is by presenting the problem, right? And that way the user is like, yeah, I do. That is an issue. That is the problem, right?
Yeah.
And you get that. You understand that. And you can engage them on that level, which I think has been really helpful for a lot of our clients. And one of the ways that they differentiate themselves, right, by talking to the customer, making them the hero of the story, if you will, and focusing on what it is that they need and how you fill that gap.
Yeah.
And you can help them suddenly begin to envision where you do fit into their lives. So then later, when it is time to make that decision, they are thinking of you, and they already know that you sort of get that.
Yeah.
And you could fill the need that they have or solve the problem that they have, even if they're not actively thinking about it in that moment. Awareness can really do that for you. It can get your message out there, but it can also connect with them on their level, meeting your audience where they are. And beginning to help them envision where you fit into that equation.
Yeah, one of the things that when we were going through our rebrand, one of the things that I remember that I kept thinking was that we have to be the only choice for the customer. We can't let them think that, well, really, you can pick 10 different brand agencies, and we're just a really good one, so you should choose us, and maybe we have a 1 in 10 shot. But since instead it's, we're the only one that does this way, and for our right customer and our right client, they will look at that and say, that's kind of the only choice. They're the only ones that can do, they're the only ones that are saying what I want to hear, and they're the only choice that I have. And you have that opportunity in top and middle of funnel to establish yourself as the only choice for them. In positioning, and that's a part of brand, but in positioning, you need to establish yourself as the only choice. There's no other way, and to do that, you have to talk different. You have to say things that resonate with that client so that they understand, okay, these guys are different. And you also have to stay true to that. If you're going to say you're different, be different. And you can be different in so many ways. I mean, you can be different in how you deliver the product. You can be different in how you, oh my goodness, there's so many different ways. How you deliver the product, how we talk to clients, customer service, even how you bill, invoice. Any of these can be differentiators in how you position yourself in the marketplace. All right, let's wrap this up. Let's talk about, this is about marketing debt. And we talked about the idea that people, when they are looking at it, and I think what we want to do is help people identify, am I going down the path of wasting, or am I on the right path for investing? And I should expect stronger returns as I continue to do this. And so some of the things that we talked about were, okay, we believe investing in brand. We believe after that make sure you have a good platform to spread that brand message out to your consumer, which should be a website with some video and some other messaging on it. That's smart. Has to be done right. And then finally start to work through the top, middle, and bottom of the marketing funnel, which is typically awareness. In the middle is education or continuing to inform, or you can even educate a client on how to do it themselves, which we'll do through this podcast. We'll educate people on, hey, we'll tell you everything that we do in our brand side. We're pretty good at executing that, but we'll give it to you too, and you can try and do it yourself if you want. And then finally, always asking people to hire us, asking people to convert, or for the accountant, same thing. Like, hey, we're happy to meet with you. Contact forms on your website and the such. Anything else that you think you would give advice to those people maybe with that small or medium business about how to decide where they are? Are they in the middle of wasted spend? Are they in the middle of investing and they're good? But how do you diagnose that, you think, in a way that would help people?
Yeah, I think this is the common thing that we do with a lot of clients that come to us in different stages, is coming to a shared understanding of what success looks like in the stage you're in right now. So you mentioned earlier not viewing spend as wasted, right? And I think that's an important point about looking at what is it that we're trying to accomplish and setting realistic goals and targets to do that and continuing to build on that. And that doesn't mean that once you figure it out, like now you've got the recipe and you just duplicate it over and over again. Marketing often doesn't work that way. The industry is always evolving and always changing. So I think everybody has to go into it with the mindset of, we are here to find the audience and to get qualified leads back in. And that might look different at different stages of the funnel, but ultimately this is where we're headed.
Yeah.
And approaching each stage of that with an open mind and the mindset of what we're trying to do is get data. We need data to help us make the right decisions, and being open to pivoting that, whether that's trying a different platform, trying different forms, things like that. Oftentimes we'll test different types of ads, for example, or we'll do a mix of digital and traditional and see what we can do for a client based on what their goals are. And I think we do best when we have those conversations really candidly with the client, not just internally as a team. So we'll talk about, what are the goals and what are the ways and the paths. Like we were talking earlier this week about a client that we're not entirely sure if the mix of digital and traditional will work for them. They might have to lean into traditional for a short period of time, which seems like not what would come to you right away or what you would expect to hear from us. But there's always ways that those tactics can be combined. So I guess ultimately the biggest advice I would say is to try to take that step back and look at what stage you're really in and what you're trying to accomplish, because not all marketing investments are equal. And even to your point earlier, even a website and things like that have a lifespan. But I would argue that doing it right the first time, you're going to be able to leverage all of that later when it needs to be redesigned or moved to another platform that's now bigger or better or stronger in some way, because that evolution happens too. So I think for me, it's more about where are you, what stage are you in, and what does success look like, and who are the best partners to help you get there? And what do you need them focused on?
And I think we try and be a good partner. I'll just tout, and talk about our agency a little bit, and that what we try and do is have those conversations you're talking about very openly with the client from the very start. That if you want to have these conversations with us, we're happy to. If you want to talk about success and what that looks like, we're happy to share with you the pitfalls, the possibilities, all of that. We're willing to talk about any of it. We make no guarantees as an agency. We don't say we guarantee that we will work hard to find the best success we can for our clients. But, be very wary of those out there that are, I'll guarantee we'll do this, and I know this is going to work, or I know that's going to work. Like, that's probably not. It's a difficult world out there in marketing, and it is. But man, you can really reap the rewards too if you really put the work into it. Well, this has been a great conversation. I hope you guys all have learned something from it with this idea of marketing debt and how you can decide where you are with your company. If you ever have any questions, comments, make sure and put them down below. We'd be happy to respond. So with that, thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, guys. Bye-bye.